Here we are. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Danny Cruz here, along with Leah Ward, or Wald, sorry. My apologies, Leah Wald, and her husband, Robin Nordling. And Robin and myself and Leah, we did our video, which you can go to my YouTube channel, the Danny Cruz Realm channel there, and catch the first video of what we did a quite in-depth introductory of dying unto death. And in that video, we spoke about, the whole meaning of the word taboo that is used against you in terms of death. And so where we're going with all of this is about exploiting that word taboo and removing it from the roots of your knowledge and from your mind and hearts, and really trying to show the significance in learning to embrace death and recognizing that death is actually not the end. It's actually the beginning of where you're going back to from where you started. And so to give a simple description or even a visual is to understand and know that you were a spirit prior to coming into your vessel that you're in right now. And when your time comes, you are going to depart from your vessel and go back. Okay, and so that's the basic introductory fundamentals about death and to dying. And some will say, it's the birth, or, and so we're going to go now and go a little further. And again, welcome Leah and Robin to the Danny Cruz Realm.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys again. It's not always easy getting schedules put together and whatnot, right? So yeah. So let's we'll jump right into things, everybody. And again, what we're discussing here in this video in the Danny Cruz Spirit Realm on the channel, the Telegram channel and Telegram chat group, which is open to the public. You can refer to the readings as they're posted, and then we do videos to help break down some of that language, because I'm very, very detailed in the work that I do and perform. So let's take a look at the forums and on subjects of death. All right. And now one must break down the taboo. That's first and foremost. That's the big thing, taboo. And that would be, again, here on the subject of death as we're continuing on. This subject must be openly discussed, and I think so. It really does. I believe if the education system, for example, is gonna, I think it should be talked about a little bit, but at the same time, education is also just meant for education, especially for children. But taking this information, remember, education doesn't stop when the child is done school. It needs to be continued, and that would be in the home and after school, right? So now one must bring out only the scientific facts, and that's where a lot of people start getting confused. And so I've broken down another section or elements about death. And some of you are aware, we go into mediumship. There's apparitions of the dead, right? Some people may see spirits or hear them, right? Some people have out-of-body experiences or reincarnation memories. And I'll expand on that a little bit further into the teachings, because that's another huge significant factor when memories come into play. Right? Some people have that thought, they might not, this might be their first incarnation to Earth, but then they're like, well, how is it my first incarnation? Or I must be reincarnated, but yet they have memories of things that have transpired for many, many years ago, right? And so um, this is where your mind actually remembers some of the things that happened prior to you coming into your vessel today. And so that is a big thing that must not be ignored and heavily examined within self and learning more. And that's what we're going to do here. There's also spirit photographs and spirit voices, right? So they, say with fog, or steam in a shower, or with water, that sort of thing. When your ears, like myself, are really tuned, you can hear them. Sometimes it becomes annoying when you want to shut it off. And then there's possession type cases where people believe they're or are possessed, and we'll get into those fundamentals as we go. And then there's deathbed visions. Some people are able to forecast a death date, right? And so that puts some stress on the people. However, I believe they put that stress because there's guilt there, and they haven't followed through with what they really been wanting to do, but they've pushed on through their life thinking it has to be done this way instead of just letting go. And we'll talk about that lots as we go, is that word letting go. That is another super critical avenue. Is there anything, Leah or Robin, you'd like to touch on quickly in those areas that I've broken down?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the taboo, I guess, acknowledging where that comes from and its purpose. It doesn't really serve our younger generations for elders to withhold the knowledge of death if they themselves don't fear it. I guess pulling on that thread, and I'm sure you can elaborate on that, why is death off limits? And it would suggest that through exposing your consciousness to those ideas, that you may discover that there is something beyond life, that what we consider living in this vessel isn't our only life. So that would open up more questions for the individual or the seeker, and what are you going to find when you look for answers, right? Eventually, you may find God, right? So yeah, acknowledging, I guess, why the taboo is in place, and obviously someone that is institutionalized these fear-like scenarios around death really fears us connecting with God. So yeah, I think that may be a really good place to start, and then examining the psyche of what would cause someone to want someone else to not be in contact with their godliness. Why would it serve me to prevent Leah from experiencing God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. It's almost like, well, when we look at the medical industry, for example, how much fear that they install into everyone's mind, right? And now and everyone can see how that creates that financial funnel, energetically, and again, like I said, the finances onto everyone, and it puts them into fear mode.
And then death is that ultimate fear, right? Where if we're so fearful of getting sick, and we'll do all these things to to create this kind of chaotic reality so that we don't die, right?
Yeah.
But but is that the worst thing, right? Like that's what we have to really come to is what is this fear really about?
Hmm. Exactly. So let's um so let's say people, even if they do not believe in the things that I mentioned above, right? Like mediumship, apparitions of the dead, out of body experiences, reincarnation, memories, spirit voices, or possession cases, that type of thing. Now, if there's at least one or two of those things that we have mentioned, and bring one to a strong belief of the survival soul, of their soul, then truly we exist beyond death. And death is merely a transformation of consciousness, from one in the flesh to one in spirit. Immortality of the soul is confirmed in those who had experienced near death experience and out of body experiences, right? So it's there. When people are feeling skeptic, or even let's say people with religion, they seem, and this is where I want to kind of help bring a little bit of a bridge between spirituality and religion, because I always say they go hand in hand, and they actually do. But for people that like say that are just based on religion and read the language of a Bible, right? If they try to mock people like us who are more into the, who choose a different faith, or just go with in spirit and energy, vibration and frequency to God, all of this comes back around together, because what does even the language say in the Bible, right? The Holy Spirit. There's the biggest key factor right there. So there is life after the vessel. And the Bible references that many hundreds of times, hundreds. It's everywhere. So now that we kind of have an understanding that we exist beyond death, and that death is just a transformation in consciousness, right? And we're able to have these different type of experiences, like out of body experiences, even through sleep, right? Spirit leaves the body, decides to go travel, which is called astral traveling, and you can train yourself to do that in the physical. And now let's look about, or talk about the immortality.
Yeah.
Right. So the immortality of the soul is confirmed, that those who had experienced a near death experience, okay, or an OBE, out of body experience, right? So when one has seen a ghost, this fact should also reinforce our belief in the mortality of the soul. Mystics who have realized the self will tell you that there is really no death. The transition from personal consciousness to cosmic consciousness is similar to going to sleep at night. It is our habitual waking up in each morning that assures us that sleep is harmless. Although in deep sleep, our souls visit the astral world nightly. And so death is not really as fearful as we have been indoctrinated. It is merely a long sleep, right? And so maybe I'd love to hear your perspective too, Robin and Leah, on this, because when we sleep, as I've always known and through my family teachings, is, we actually do. And I've seen much evidence just my own spirit communications that yes, we go up and we go cruising around, right? So, and some experiences we're meant to see, which can be quite scary. But if we base the intention and surround ourselves in positive energy, and remind ourselves to do that, then there will be no harm, right?
And that journey, once you're asleep, does that reflect how much work you're doing in the physical during the day as well. Like, I feel like, as the more in tune you are at that, like during your daytime, during your wake hours, that, there's kind of that equivalent at night, and how aware you are of what is going on. I mean, I know Robin kind of went through a lot more of his spiritual journey earlier than I did, but I witnessed so much of him like at nighttime, just, I mean, absolutely checking out. Like, I couldn't believe how much he can, because he's literally working on the other side,
Mhm.
Yeah, I would often joke that she would have to deal with my
stand-in.
my stand-in, my spiritual devil. I would reassure her. I would say, yeah, don't mind him. He's just testing out a human body, so he's doesn't know what he's doing. He just, yeah.
He would answer my
Pretends to
questions,
be
and
me.
but when he comes back into his physical, he has no idea what we were talking, because like, I'm
Yeah.
literally like dealing with the babies, or dealing with nighttime crying or whatever, and he's talking and he's answering. There's absolutely, like, when he comes back to actually being physically in his body, it was like, whoa, well, what? Like, he had no idea.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sort of half convinced that, yeah, I may have I had a deal with some other form of
Mhm.
consciousness. Maybe the next version of me is kind of trying it out at nights or something, seeing what breathing's like in this dense reality. But yes, I do feel that um, it's exhausting for the spirit to be in a physical embodiment all day long. It's exhausting to maintain the connection to source. So we all think we're tired, so my body needs to sleep and recharge. When really it's I've experienced needing less and less sleep the more I've connected with oneness within, right? The
Mhm.
more I've sought a balance inside, the less I need to vacate this vessel, because my connection is more open on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So the spirit is less drained at the end of the day. So 5 hours and I'm raring to go again.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I can definitely attest to there being a connection of self on a much higher level.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually a really good point that you made there. And I'd like to touch on that real quick here before we move forward. And that is, um, a lot of us, or a lot of people, and even people that are learning, through religion or spiritualism, it is very, very important that we learn to use universal energy and as the transfusion through our own.
Mm.
So it's using less of our own energy and pulling in from the universe. So this would be your surroundings and all that, and literally pulling it down from up in the sky, right? Because just like you reflected on, you know, less sleep, you're able to function. There's a lot more clarity happening, um, and being able to go into the spirit realm and even out into the stars, right, and other planets, for example, right. You're going to want to use that universal energy, and when we don't use universal energy, what happens when we just confine and use our own? We get severe headaches. People will notice the backs of their necks will tense right up, and then it goes right up the back of the head and comes to the front, because it's just, it's just too much. A lot of pain there. So when we, again, reflecting back on mediumship and apparitions of the dead, reincarnations, and with what the medical system does to a lot of people, how, and what are some of the steps that we need to take to reduce the fear of dying, right? And one of the major things that I'm going to touch on here is, um, you have to admit your fear of death. Just like anything, you have to admit that you fear death.
Yeah.
And and do not repress it. Do not exaggerate it to the extent of fearing to live and thus becoming a hypochondriac, right? Discuss it openly and hear other people's views. And let's not pretend to be fearless of it, because at the end of the day, the way they have people under control, you will fear it. And so it's time to end that. Now there's different types of exercises in detachment of the body, and having been told that death itself is not a painful, but the fear of death is agonizing. And one must try not to identify with the body. Various methods of detachment to the body have been tried for thousands of years. And this is in a lot of like the Eastern world, primarily, I'm gonna say with India and over in, Indonesia, for example. Now, or even with Japan, right? And one of the examples I share in my write-ups is like sleeping on nails. Meditating alongside corpses is actually, believe it or not, is some of the physical practices that they do to help remove that crust, from the mind, that you lay and sleep next to a corpse. And then learning to channel, and then being able to communicate with that spirit. So, and that goes into, it's not voodoo magic, it's not black magic or black arts. I'm going to state that real clear right now, just because this is a way of removing detachments, but yet learning how to channel yourself to speak and be able to step in and step out healthy in and out of the spirit realm. And then there's another method, and that's, here for the Western world, is just to lie down and prepare to die. So in other words, practicing that in your bed or, on the couch or floor. Not meaning doing anything to yourself physical, but physical in the sense of just being there with yourself. And that opens up the mind. This gets the chakras open up, right? Because you're going to still concentrate the proper breathing techniques. You're going to fill yourself in with love, but you're going to start doing those projections. And this is actually the introduction of how astral projection really begins, and really takes you to different places, but healthy and safe. And that's what we're always about, including myself, and the way I was always brought up. It was always to be in the healthy and straight place at all times. And as we know today, also in proper grounding, right? Grounding yourself. Now, a few people may also, they want to go through exercises in pretending that it's their last hour. So as we kind of looked at in the 5 stages in our first half of the video, there was the 5 stages, right? There's the shock factor, and then you're bargaining, and you're, doing things. And then finally step 5 being the acceptance. And so some people do, to help remove fear, is that they will set the intention that it's their last hour, right? And then as they go through those motions, and people that want to try this, make sure you have a pen and paper handy, because the experiences that you'll get from that, you're going to definitely want to write that down. And so, and then you imagine the rest of it, right? You have the whole funeral and the people there, and all that played out. And so when in meditation, and knowing how, when you're bringing in all that energy for yourself to manifest and to astral, you want to meditate that the body can be broken down into 32 parts. Okay. And also meditate that the body is composed of earth, water, air, and fire. And everything material is renewable, and there is a beginning and an end to everything compounded. And death is the last stage for growth, and or maybe some people, with birth. Now, death is the final stage of growth, as I just said, and is the only end of the physical body. But our spirit actually does still live on, and it is trying to conform to the external definitions of who we are that our dispels our spiritual path. So each of us in unique, but we try to fit into, we always try to fit into some kind of stereotype or some kind of culture to define us. And really, it's what we're learning and what we're doing here. It's for yourself, right? Like you take what you need and you go with yourself with it. Just because someone reads the Bible doesn't mean you have to read the Bible too, and vice versa. Just because that person doesn't practice spirituality doesn't mean they have to. But we're the tools and understanding is where everyone is at. Everyone's at different stages. So there is no rush to say, hey, you need to be like me. No, you don't. You just take the tools and you incorporate that into yourself and make that work for you, right? And so death is the key to the door of life. And when we fully realize that our lifespan is limited, we are able to reject all the extrinsic roles and expectations that are put upon us by society. And society would be the elites. I don't see society. We actually don't do that to each other. That's not natural.
Mhm.
Our natural, we communicate and we listen through vibration and sound and frequency, but it's the elite. So it's funny, even in my notes, how when I took these down many, many years ago, they say society, but it's not, it's the elites. So now in order to grow and committing yourself to serve and help other people to grow, we must serve to eliminate the suffering of others and help others to recover from their depression. And that's something that comes in, again, from what, systems designed by the elites have done to people. More importantly, one must give up everything to gain everything. Very, very critical. We must give up everything to gain everything. And when we do that, we are starting to learn how to be selfless again, right? And erase and being able to erase self-doubt in order to love and trust yourself, and you will become your true self. And to do that, you have to allow yourself to come right down to ground zero, right? To be that vulnerable. So if to give one really good example, if if someone knows a family member, for example, who was an alcoholic or drug addict, a gambling addict, a skydiving addict, it doesn't matter. Any major form of addiction that has brought harm to that person, once they hit that rock bottom where it's like, please, right? What happens? That person becomes at absolute zero and they become that vulnerable. And please do not mistaken vulnerable for being weak. It's actually strength. And people will notice when someone goes through that, what happens? They get filled with so much love, because that's the strength that's coming in from the universe, right? From the angels, from God. It's coming in and it's filling you up with love, giving you the strength and the perseverance to continue, because you got a great mission set for you, right? And so seeing that death means only the destruction of the body and not yourself, it can be viewed as raising the curtain, separating the physical from the spirit world. And in the last days, we would know the purpose of life only too vividly. And so I've had this conversation with many people, is that those who turn away or try to snub religion and spiritualism or choose not to believe, I guarantee you 199.99% that in the last 5 days, they will be already getting their crash course that life moves on after the vessel.
Mhm.
And then they'll be brought up to speed once the transition from vessel to spirit takes place. And so when we go into now looking at other factors, let's say the science, right? If we look at the science side of things, let's use an elderly person, for example, with a terminal illness, and they know their time is up, right? There's pride there. They don't want to share that, but they know time is up. And so circulation of the death hormone and escaping of the soul electricity. The threads of the silver cord begin to loosen. The soul is now more attracted to the spiritual body, and it begins its journey towards the brain, the crown chakra, through which the spirit enters the photos. Now begins to open up for the reverse process of death. This is the preparation of the release of the spirit soul in due course. And the patient's life force starts to retreat towards the brain from the feet. As the life force leaves the feet, they turn cold and pale. The hands and arms are similarly affected, with the nails turning purple. The breathing is now labored and the eyes are dimmed with a faraway look. The pineal gland is becoming extremely active at this point. Okay, and even though a lot of people may not realize it, it's very, very active. As the crown chakra expands in its opening, the porous brain is going to allow the soul to pass upwards through the silver cord. The Kundalini wakens for the upward journey, and the 3 permanent seed atoms prepare for their departure. The emotional seed atom sits in the 3rd chakra and is responsible for all the emotions of the patient. The mental seed atom sits at the 6th chakra and is responsible for all the activities of the mind. Now, these 2 seed atoms are influenced by free will. Okay, and free will is a big one. The heart seed atom sits at the heart chakra and contains the Akashic records, the Sanskaras, the karma, and the G plan. And we'll get into G plan definition and define moments of what that is, but just for now, it means either a grounding plan or God's plan. It's your sacred contract that we made before we came into the vessel. So now we're situated at the right chest next to the lower sternum. This heart seed atom and its contents are fixed and are not controlled or influenced by free will. It is the destiny of the individual. So we can now kind of see how there's 2 separate things that are at play. And this is why over the 5 days, the body will be there for about 5 days, and it starts separating at the horizontal, right? So the body, the spirit will sit like this, and let's say this is the body here, it's dying, right? The vessel's dying, and then it's gonna start coming up like this, right? And then it goes. So as with the Kundalini, and now as that moves upwards, the emotional seed atom in the solar plexus departs first, after the life force in it moves upward and reaches the solar plexus. After the emotional seed atom leaves through the silver cord, pain is no more felt. The person feels no more pain, it's gone. And it's interesting why in the medical profession, why they induce a drug, right? Because, even in the spirit realm, when you transition from, say, going from a spirit guide and you're going to go into a higher form in the angelic realm, moving up a level, we'll say, right? You're leveling up. You're going to die again as a spirit and you transition again. But each transition becomes more painful. Now, we don't know that, but does the medical profession know that? Because they administer the drug, right?
Danny, I have a
But-
question.
Yeah.
Is it 5 days for a person? Like, is the time difference different when there's, say, a person who lived a very spiritual life and had more awareness and had already activated their Kundalini? Like, would this process be faster for them come that day? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So,
Yeah.
like, say for your, I'll use both of you as an example. When your time comes, you're already that much more advanced, right? And people that are advanced, it'll happen very quickly. It can be from hours to maybe up to 2 days, right? You're not going to go through the full 5 days. Where I'm coming from in this full 5 days, and thank you for asking, is for a lot of people. I'm going to say the common person, because the common person doesn't understand chakras and the atoms, and knowing that the chakras are the true roots to our body, right? They're the true roots in our body. And so this is where we're coming from in helping people understand, because it's very important. Now, the patient, sorry, I kind of lost with my notes here. Now, I believe I just read this. As the Kundalini and the life force move further upwards. Okay, this is the second part. Okay, so I did read the first part, right? Okay. So now the patient becomes, so now that the patient, right, where I left off was about the death, and they're not feeling any more pain, right?
Yeah.
And the mental and the heart seed atoms, they're still in the physical body, and the patient or person, they'll lie there in a death coma for some time, but normally, it's just for a few moments because of the silver cord. So as the Kundalini and the life force move further upwards, the patient becomes more psychic, and his consciousness and awareness are both expanding. When the Kundalini hits the pituitary pineal center at the crown chakra, the third eye is open and clear of all void appears. Okay, at this juncture, many dying patients become very psychic. And I'll list those in a second, but first I want for the three of us to touch on that is, and as I, coach with a lot of people, the first stage of that two sentences there that I just spoke about, the first major hint is when the person that is in that transition of passing, they start talking about, and usually it's within the last 2 to 3 days before the body they're done, right? They start talking about or asking, who are all these people? So let's just say say if I was on my deathbed and the both of you were at my side, just helping me stay calm and just keeping a positive atmosphere, I would then look, kind of like talk to you and say, hey, who are all these people here? Because I see a lot of them. But the state isn't going to be like how I just reacted now. It's going to be like more like, who are all these people here? It's going to come out in that kind of a scenario, and they're going to be able to hear them. They're seeing them, and that's where we know your third eye is wide open. It's the visions there. And even into this day, when we look at the third eye opening, a lot of people, you should be feeling some sensational feelings right here, because with the brain, where it sits, it opens up a bit, and it's because it's opening, right? Very, very powerful, that eye. So if you, sorry,
No.
I'd like to hear your reflections on that as well, please.
Well, as a energy worker practitioner, I do healing work. I can definitely verify these concepts of the seed atoms, and the way I tuned the information that was most useful to my ability to convey the information was the father aspect resided in the crown, the part of the Trinity, and the mother in the solar plexus, and the child in the heart. And I guess the most appropriate terms I found was lower Dantian, middle Dantian, and upper Dantian, which are terminology from Qigong. And it really is bringing in universal energy. Before I really understood the energy work I was doing, I knew I had a knack for something, but I was using internal energy, and I would need to work on myself as much as the client afterward. I would take so much in and deplete myself so much. And it was opening up trust, that something was going on that I wasn't fully in control of, but that I was participating in. And if I were to trust it and allow it to come through, I didn't have to apply my will. So I find it very intriguing that you said will isn't associated with the heart, but it's associated with both the mind, where we consider the ego to reside, and also the emotions. And a lot of the times my clients, I'll be working hard on getting them out of ego perception and ego consciousness, and saying trust your emotions. But at the same time, we think it's logical to not base every decision based on our emotional state at the time, right? Because if you're having a bad day, you're going to really deny yourself a lot of opportunity. So that's not logical to trust your emotions. So why are we trusting our ego's perception as well? So yes, this concept of free will is I think where we get ourselves in trouble. And the greatest asset I've been in healing with clientele is to be heart-centered, to drop the ego at the door. I can't do anything. I'm not going to try to do anything, but my heart is open to being the greatest ground or facilitator for their own experience that I can be. And when I have that intention going in, the work takes care of itself. It's been so simplified yet so effective, and we get right to the issue, and the client as well feels that as well, that there's no expectation for them or from me. So it really allows them to be in a safe place and free up their consciousness from being too attached to one seed or the other. I think free flow is it's an in-breath and an out-breath. So yeah, I don't know if we're meant to reside in one all the time, or if the whole point of it is to understand will through residing in one or the other.
Yeah, very good. That was a very, very good explanation, and which actually leads us into the next part. And just before we do, I wanted to touch on the when the patient or the person that's dying, right, and they're at that final juncture, Like I said, they become very psychic. And so some of the things that they're able to do uh, is wake up briefly, and that's to say goodbye to loved ones. Um, being a witness to their deathbed visions. And usually that'll be in form of people and landscapes, like I've already touched on. They may be engulfed in spiritual white light and immersed in ecstatic bliss. Have even deathbed predictions. And even before the emotional seed, right, the atom is transferred again, like we were just talking about, both you and I, upwards. And the etheric form emanates from the crown chakra. Pain ceases to hurt the patient after the emotional seed, the emotional seed atom moves into the etheric spiritual form. That is where the pain is within the transition, going from, vessel, physical to spiritual. And at this point, now this is where it gets really fascinating, especially if clairvoyants are around. Myself being one.
Yeah.
They can actually, and people like myself, we can actually see a cloud of smoke. It's a cloud of smoke, right? You can see it rising through the opening of the crown chakra, and this smoke configures into a form very well similar to the physical body lying on the bed. Now, I got a lot of photographs, and I was working with a lady who's on one of my social groups, and her father was in a hospital, and I was there, and I was taking photos. And no, just so everyone knows, this was all granted permission. It was all talked about at first, right? So I was showing them their very first full out spiritual experience, from the physical going into the spiritual. And so in the pictures, it shows, just like as we're talking about, right, the crown. And you can see it, it's like we're talking minimal inches above the head. And when you see it, you can see it translucent, like it's transparent, right? It takes the shape of the head, but also, like, say, a pillow, as the person's head laying there, right? But then as everything goes, that cloud of smoke that we see, that is now the presence of the spirit in full horizontal hovering mode. And this, like I said, is still inches. But then as the next day or so comes, it's about 3 feet from the body. And then when a lot of us are lucky to witness is that people who are in tune will get to see this process very fast. And you'll actually see the real light workers, okay? You'll actually see the light workers come, and you'll see the spirit guides. There's usually about 3 of them who will actually help and transport the spirit that left the vessel and go into the spirit realm. And so usually that'll be, like, say, like a window, for example. They'll transport through the windows and then out into the sky, which is the path of least resistance, is what they do. But can they go through ceilings and whatnot? Oh, for sure they can.
It was
So
I got there in time. My grandma lived in BC, and I got the call that she was in her last days, and she's quite unconscious prior to mine and my cousin's arrival. And we got there the night before she passed away, like early in the morning, and she hadn't really come back to, like, all that day. She's just really, like, sleeping, quiet, very unconscious. And when we got there, she kind of came back to say goodbye to me and my cousin, and she definitely was like, she was at the ocean. That was one of her favorite places with my grandpa, and they would boat and all of that. So she was visiting, as you said, landscapes and stuff. But when she passed away early that morning, we were there and dozing and in and out because it was at 4 a.m. But she literally went out with a bang. There's no window, and the door was closed. and we heard this huge bang in the hallway that nobody could explain. The nurses, my aunt ran out, and there was nobody in the hallway. Like, it was absolutely deserted. And when we went to her, she had left, and she was gone at that point. And the nurses came probably, 2-3 minutes afterwards, and we just confirmed that if, did a cart fall over, or is there something that made that bang? And they were like, we weren't even in this wing, and there was nobody around, right? And yeah, it was quite special. Let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Validation are big keys in knowing, the loved ones are around in many ways. So fascinating to hear. I love hearing stories like that. And to the viewers who are watching this, please feel free to engage in the comments here of the video, because we would love to hear and be able to comment with you as well, because this isn't a journey that you should be left with on your own by yourself going through. This is something that takes a collective of people to feel comfortable and to surround yourself with, so that way when the time comes, you're feeling prepared, or there's people you can turn to and question, just to, for some reason the ego takes over and plays a little bit of doubt into your mind, right? And so now, with what Robin had to say here just a few moments ago, this is where I think it's going to get really cool. And, with what I know, and also with what Robin, this is where, when we start looking at this spiritual, the etheric body, right? The silver cord is attached to the third eye of the patient, or the one dying. Doesn't always have to be patient, but and at the one end, and joined to the back of the lower neck, or between the shoulder blades of the etheric form at the other end. After the exit of the mental seed atom, the patient will go into a coma. The physical form is undergoing clinical death, but the spiritual awareness is much sharper. And this death process will last from 6 minutes to about half an hour. And at this point, the patient is clinically dead, but the heart seed atom, has not yet vacated the physical body yet. The silver cord is still intact, and normally the heart seed atom follows shortly after the departure of the mental seed atom. Before the heart seed atom departs from the body, a luminous glow can be seen by clairvoyance over the heart chakra.
Wow.
And that's that's so cool.
Beautiful.
And myself being able to witness this stuff and working with clients, it's absolutely amazing. It's one of those things where it's like watching a movie and you're blown away, you're mind blown every time it happens. No matter how many years experience, you're mind blowing every time. So now that all three seed atoms have escaped into the etheric form, the spiritual body begins to take the exact replica of the physical body. The facial features are now minutely sculptured onto the etheric form. The face is the same as that of the corpse, but the lines of worry and tension have all disappeared. So in other words, it's like anti-aging. You're going to look 20, 30 years younger, right? And the etheric form looks younger and serene. Now, about half an hour after the clinical death, another white light will appear to the deceased spirit, sometimes after a buzzing journey through a dark tunnel. And sometimes after climbing a flight of stairs, mostly the heart seed atom would have left the physical body, but very occasionally it can get stuck in the physical body. It can happen. And this is because in some individuals, it takes a longer time to form an etheric form. And that's why it's important to have the chakras running and operating very well at all times, right? And this is because in some individuals, it does take longer to form an etheric form. And it is this time that the physical organs begin to deteriorate and decay. The death of the organs takes between 1 to 15 hours. Okay. The silver cord now begins to shred. Once the silver cord is totally severed, no healer in the world can revive a patient. And so if someone claims they can, they can't. And this is the sign of the final death. And this is why we advocate at least 3 days before even a burial, because the heart seed atom is not released until the etheric form is more or less perfect. Then comes the breakdown of the silver cord. So all these may take 2 to 3 days to complete. And so this is why you want to have as much time with your loved one who's in passing prior to medical stuff, because that can also play a factor in the spirit becoming an earthbound spirit or it becoming trapped, right? Because of that transition. So that's a big note to a lot of people who are, you know, with loved ones, whether they're a child or, you know, an elderly person. Please be there for them. Take care of them. Ensure that in their final days that they're able to go peacefully before the medical industry has to remove the body. Okay. I'm gonna leave that open now to you, Leah and Robin, to reflect on that. And I'm gonna call it an evening for part 2 of Dying Unto Death. And tomorrow we'll continue with part 3.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, on that last note, Danny, I think that's an important one. We all fear the idea of becoming earthbound, and I know you've dealt with helping earthbounds cross over, and I myself have had a few experiences that were led by my guides and angels, so I went along with it, as skeptical as I am. And yes, I can attest to that cord. To me, it looked like a great big thread that was tethering them into the earth, and I was instructed to sever that tether to help the individual get into essentially a vortex, this tunnel, this stairway or dark tunnel up to what ended up being the moon in this case, with its magnetic pole. So is it due to someone having essentially a heavy heart at death? They're holding on so tight that, is it that atom that retains a connection? Is that why the cord appears in people that have already passed on?
Yeah, that one is it's a tough one, because when we examine the heart chakra, right? It's, what is it, 33 petals, I believe, right? So if it's not open properly, or not even open at all, and this is due to how they live their life, is why the complications come into play. And so these are instances that we must learn from. So that way, it's basically it's a positive mistake and lesson. So that way it lessens your fear, right? Because the person who is leaving the vessel, when that happens, it's on them. I'm just gonna be straightforward. It's on them, right?
Yeah.
Not to, but it's not about saying and being egotistical towards them, but that's the truth. And so this is where people like myself and yourself, Robin, become very strong helping factors in helping these spirits not become trapped. I've worked with many spirits who are trapped, even ones that, from the 1800s who are still around, who are trapped. But when these spirits are trapped, what also becomes another factor is when I'm going to go as far as saying the legions within Satan's realm, right? Within Satan's path. There's different legions of demons involved, and they become very manipulative over those types of spirits, and they will manipulate them and attack families and start attacking, children even, right? So this is again where a lot of people get in contact with me, and I come and find out what it is. I gotta wrangle the spirit up. If it tries to hide, I gotta pull it out of the dark and then move it along and then help that spirit become free.
Yes, that one instance I was referring to, that was the case. The spirit of the man was infested essentially by another presence that we could talk about another time. But yeah, exactly of that demonic ilk, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the man himself felt like a shell, but that embodiment also got to get dealt with. So other things I've come across, it was just an old man, didn't want to leave his house type of deal. But and in that case, I don't recall there being a thread on him. But yeah, it was just a reluctancy to cross over. Didn't want to let go.
Yeah, and there's spirits that are like that. I've come across that too. And sometimes I just have to sit there with the family and have a spirit session with them, right? Protected in God's divine white light. We have a conversation with the spirit there, and we just allow them to know that, hey, if there's a mutual agreement here with people that are living in this home, you have to know that this isn't your home anymore. This home is now gone. And do you understand who you are now? What you are now? Do you understand that? Right? And if they're willing to hear just that part, then it can become a beautiful blessing actually to the home too. Now, majority of the time, I'm going to say this real quick, is that I usually help the spirit trans, cross over, get into the white light, and move on. But sometimes, if they're willing to be within God's love and be with the family, right? That's okay too. It actually is. It's okay. And there's interesting things at play that happen within a home, where a spirit is active and the family is active with it as well. But there's nothing negative that happens. It's all good nature of things, right? And that can also be a blessing too. So it's lots of thought here for the people to start really allowing to resonate within themselves at the pace they want it to do that, right? But it is important to know that what they're starting to sense, feel, it is very okay. And if there's someone they want to, reach out and talk to, with this video on the YouTube page, you can reach out to us and comment in there, and be happy to be of assistance in any way, shape we can. So, but for myself, this concludes part 2 of Dying Unto Death. Thank you so much, Leah and Robin, for joining me this evening. I love talking with you guys. It's always, we've said this many times, 20 minutes, and next, it's only been an hour and a half. Right?
Yeah.
It's definitely a pleasure.
Yeah, I really appreciate our time and value it so much. So thank you. And to everyone who watches this video, have yourself a wonderful evening and God bless you all. And if you enjoy the videos, please hit the like and subscribe button because we have so much more cool info coming and we don't want you to miss one bit of it. You can also tune in to Danny Cruz Spirit Realm on Telegram. And there are a series of introductory write-ups, everything from Taoism, Sunada, to Shikantaza, right? Different forms of meditation and Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism. There's a lot of introductory stuff that I've written and presented already. So please head over there if you haven't and grab yourself some of that paperwork and, you know, take the tools that you need for yourself and help yourself. Take care of your body. It's a garden, right?
Mhm.
So much love to you all and have a good night.
You too.
Too.